everyone. Welcome to our, I think it's September meetup of Sampler Simplifying Module Authoring with Best Practices. Just a short introduction of who I am. I am Konstantin Hager. I am a consultant / PowerShell enthusiast. I work at a company called COC AG. We are based in Burghausen. It's, I think, 100 kilometers away from Munich. You can reach me on the Twitter, and there is also the Twitter handle for our user group. And also you can reach me on LinkedIn if you want. Yeah, some housekeeping. Only me doesn't do that. Mute your microphone, please. And yeah, the session will be recorded. Will be on our YouTube channel. And I think it's okay for Gael if someone has a question, just unmute or write it in the chat. I will monitor the chat.
Yeah. And just to let you know, I don't know if you're sharing something, but to me, I've got a black screen. So hopefully it's my team.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I shared some PowerPoint, but that's no worries. Yeah, we got today's speaker, Gael Colas. I think if I turn it over to him, I think he will introduce himself.
No.
Yeah, that was my housekeeping, and I think I will stop presenting, and Gael can share his screen.
Yeah, let me bring the one back up, and then do that one. My screen is this one, I think. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So hi, my name is Gael. I've been there before. Actually, I was there. So last time was, I believe, Raymond, and he was presenting Automated Lab. And I think before that, it was me, something like this. And
yes,
we've
done the DSC past and future.
Yes, so it was it was a lot about DSC, and it was, I would say, probably quite advanced. So when we discussed with Konstantin, we said, okay, let's do something which is a bit less advanced, a bit more generic. And I said, well, actually, Sampler might be a good candidate. And then when I was working on this session, I thought, okay, if I start showing samplers on all the features of Sampler, and you can ask Andre, he's been using it, there's a lot going on. It's a lot of moving parts, and it really helps you when you understand what the challenges are. So my goal here was to step back, and then I'm going to go back to, okay, what's the PowerShell module? Start from the basics, probably go a bit fast on some things, but hopefully go back to the basics and then show the steps. Okay, if you're not using a PowerShell module, what are you doing? And then go from there and then do some progress. So I'll try to go not too fast, but not too slow. So I'm not going to cover all the details about what a PowerShell module is and how it works, but I'm going to show you some principles. And then if I'm going too fast, let me know. If I'm going too slow, let me know as well. Except for Raymond, because I know it's going to be slow, but I don't care about Raymond, so it's okay. Just kidding. Raymond and I just chat a lot of quite often on the phones, and we discuss all of these things already. That's why. If you have any questions, as Konstantin said, like, feel free to just unmute and then ask the question straight away. That's fine with me.
I will.
Naive. Can we just permanently mute him just in case? No, actually, if you have questions and if I'm not around or there's questions, and maybe actually Raymond can also check on the chat if you don't want to unmute. Raymond's been using Sampler and he knows, obviously all about modules and stuff. So feel free to ask him. So yes, I have this on the screen at the moment because we're organizing the next PowerShell Conference Europe. It's the same team and it's the same organizers, I would say, as the previous year, except maybe I used to help out. I was not really organizing, but you can see there's Alexander. There's Patrick, who's the local guy, so he's based in Linz, close to Vienna. And then me, and obviously Tobias is there, still wants to carry his own, and obviously Rob as well. So, and make sure that, so if you go at the top here, you can see there's a register button, and that takes you to Tito, which is the ticketing platform. There's no ticket for sales yet, but make sure you fill that one in, because if you want to see when it goes on sale, maybe if there's discount codes, or maybe if there's news, that's probably the best way for us to get in touch with you. No, that's my little bit of advertisement. Oh yeah, and obviously we haven't released anything yet in terms of schedule and things like this. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to me or to the other organizers. Twitter as well, follow PSConfig on Twitter. And you can see it's going to be 23rd of June, 2022 in Vienna. And which is kind of you were saying, like you're about, what did you say, 1 hour from Munich? I'm about, I think I live in Switzerland now, so I'm French. I used to live in the UK. My business is based in the UK, and then I've been moving a bit around. And I think now I'm in Switzerland, and it's about 4 hours from Munich. And then Vienna is going to be 4 hours from Munich. So maybe I'll just do a trip, stay by Munich just to have a beer, and then carry on to Vienna in June next year. That would be a good road trip. We shall see. We shall see if my wife allows it. All right, so what about the problem we have today? Is my screen big enough? Can you see I have too many things open? Boom. Let's clear that one up.
I think it's quite right, yeah. So
you can see the code. Do you want it bigger? Is that good enough?
I think it's okay. So if someone in chat or someone unmute and say it's okay.
Of course.
Yeah. I don't see the chat, but obviously if Konstantin or Raymond sees something, just let me know.
Yeah.
So what happens when we don't use a PowerShell module? So actually, because we're using Teams, if you are writing modules regularly, I would say, just do a hands up, not on the picture, but using the hands up feature, raise hand, in Teams. Yeah, so not everyone is writing them really often, which is good because then you're going to learn how to do it and what to do. And that's exactly why I wanted to go back. So we'll start by, okay, you've got something to automate in your company. And what do? Well, because you're here, probably you write a script and a PowerShell one. So what do? You start writing the thing you want to do, and you specify, some data that you want to use, and just the script that does the thing that you want to automate. So from there, if I just want to execute that, oops, sorry. Actually, I'm just going to close that one. That's going to be kill terminal. I will start from a fresh console. I'll just create a new one here. There you go. Yeah, I need to update. I know I'm a bit slow. I just need to do Choco update and anyway. So what I want to do, I have my script there. I just want to run the script to do the thing that I've automated. And let me lower my hand. So my script is X1, and then that's just the subfolder, and it's called my script PS1. Something simple. And what it does is, okay, today is this date. I think that's the way you format the dates in Germany. I think it's something like this. Yes. So there's different ways, but I wanted to show you because when you write, and we'll get to that later, when you write a function, you want to make sure you keep the type of the object as a date time, the longest time possible, and only format it at the last time. So in this case, I'm just running the script which says, okay, today is and then I am presenting on what is the subject and for which user group, which is good. Easy. And then if you want to change something, then you can just change the data here. So that's usually how people do, they create the script. They have some data at the top of the script, change the script, and then run the scripts wherever they need to. Perfectly fine. When you want to automate something, that's probably what everyone starts with. Easy peasy. What happens when you want to do some modifications, and maybe you want to be able to run this with different parameters, but you don't really want to change these data every single time. You want to be able to say, hey, I want to provide this information. So that would be the default, but I want to provide the information. So we have a script. The easiest way is just to parameterize it, and that's not too difficult. We can very quickly do something like this. All right, I'm just saying those things are my parameters. Sorry, Teams a little bit. only have 64 gigs of RAM. That's probably the problem. So I'm just making sure I've got parameters. So those are my parameters now. So if I go back here, I can do the same thing, but now I have my parameters available directly to my script. I haven't changed much, but that's already much easier to use and to use different data. So I can override my data with, in this case, I just want my subject to be sampler. And then if you see, it used to be PS module with sampler, and now it's just sampler because I've overridden this data. Very easy. And then I can do the same thing, let's say with the date. So just the event date, the name of the parameter I've named here. It takes a date time, but PowerShell is clever. So if I just give it a string, and then the string can be anything like, okay, let's do next year. And I can do the same thing. Oh, it's not today. Yeah, because I have, some logic, not too much, but I'm just checking if it's today or not, and then I can override this. All right, pretty simple. That's just a function. And I'm just going to use that function and just use this principle to evolve. And that could be anything you automate. I just want to give some idea of what's going on there. Fine. Let me just take, I got some notes. So I just need every now and then to stop and pause. If you have any questions so far, just let me know. So you've parameterized the file. I know you've got this. So I'm just going to go back here because that was what we started with. And this is what we end up with. All right. We have parameters there in a parent block at the beginning of the script. Simple. And then what people do is, okay, I've got parameters, which is good, but at some point I may want to add more complexity to my script. But if I just do everything in one file and doing like this process going through everything, it's going to be a bit complicated. So maybe there's a better way to approach that, and that's creating functions. So from these scripted parameters, we start going with different functions. So what do? We've got the same thing. We still want to call this file, but inside this file, we're defining different functions. So one is to get the message, and the other one is to show the message. And then we just define this function, and then we're using those functions with the parameters we provided. So we go with, all right, that's how to get the message. So I have a bit more logic into this. And then the same message here, if it's today, if it was past, so let's say tomorrow I want to run this, then I will have a different message. And again, if it's tomorrow maybe, and if it's not yet the day of the meeting and it's not past, then I will just say, hey, are you ready for your talk? So that is just returning the message, so returning a string, and then I can use that with my other function, which actually takes value from pipeline as a parameter, which is my message parameter, and then say, well, if the message that is used as a go, then it will be green. If it's ready yet, and I just wanted to show you that it's a regex because I've got my switch as a regex here. So if is it ready yet, then it will be red, and then otherwise anything else it's going to be yellow. So I can use that function by itself, or I can use it with the get bset message. So that's how I would use it. And if you're not familiar, I define all my parameters here in the hash table, and they're coming from my parameters here. So the defaults are still based on my script, and I can pipe what I get from the get bset message to my show bset given message. Let's do this. So now I run this, which is my example 3, and then my script with functions. So that's if it's today, but it's still my script, and I can still change the event date. So as I said, if I say, well, the event is in 1 year, so 2022, what happens? Okay, this is now written in red. And if it was, let's say last year, then it is green, it was done before. So you see, I've added more complexity, but then the complexity is in one function, and then I have another function. Sorry, the one above, and I have another function just to show the message. All right, so far so good? Make sense?
Yeah, I just want to add something. It's always good, like Gael did, to use some kind of prefix after your what is the verb to make it your own, or don't do duplicates on other commandlets that already I think show event message. But if you use some kind of your own prefix, then the possibility is high to
have a conflict.
Yes.
Yeah, naming conflict is a big problem. So if I have something which is get message, you can imagine that there's a lot of modules that would have a get message. If something is a string, get string, there will be too many conflicts. So that means if you want to use, and we'll get to the module parts later, but if you want to reuse it somewhere else, you may think you are calling a get message from that module, but you're actually calling from another module. And being PowerShell being so flexible, if you just do get message, maybe it will actually automatically load another PowerShell module which has this function than the one you desire. So then there's ways to just make sure you use the right one. But as Constantine said, make sure you have a prefix which is quite specific to you or your use case. So it could be initials of the company you're writing this for. It could be very specific domain that doesn't exist already in the PowerShell gallery, at least, like these kind of things.
Yeah, a bad example for this could be get VM, I think. Yes. Or Hyper-V and the VMware, I think. I don't know if VMware changed it. A good example is, for example, the PowerShell framework who uses PSF as prefix.
Yes, and get VM is a very good example, because I believe at some point, at least, there was a similar VM maybe for VMware. They had something which is similar, get VM. So you can think, you have Hyper-V. If you have Hyper-V on your machine, automatically it will load. Oh, I've got the kids crying around. I don't know if you can hear that. But if you have get VM and then you have Hyper-V on your machine, and actually you meant the get VM for VMware, that's a conflict.
Yeah, you can go around that by using the import module -prefix, but not so much people know about that. So just to call it off.
Yeah, and you can still have some issues, because then it depends on the scope you're calling it from. But best is when you design your commandlets, or you design your modules or your scripts, make sure you have something which is unique enough, at least. The kid is crying. It's bedtime for him, that's why. I don't know if you hear him crying, but that's probably gonna go on for a little bit.
That's no problem.
All right, so that was the script with functions. Assuming there's no problem here. And so then you've got your script with functions. So that's what we've got here, script with function. That's cool. You can imagine that having all the functions in one file starts to be a bit messy if you have something which is rather complex. So what can you do? Then the first thing you can do is start splitting the functions into their own files. It makes it much easier to manage the code. But then you still want to be able to use that script and invoke that script. So what you do is you separate those functions into a different file, each of them, and then you want to .source, that means import to some extent, import in the current scope, the files. So the example is in example 4. You have my script with my function here. Always the same, the parameters, so we can reuse them and then call the function with the right parameters. So you see that bit and that bit is the same thing. The only thing we did is we created those files with the functions that you've seen earlier, this one and this one. But then I haven't changed them at all. It's just the same thing, the same content. But then we said, oh, that's not the right, sorry, I closed the wrong one. My script with functions, that one. Those functions now are the same, they're just .sourced. The .source is because you do a dot here and then you tell where is the source, and the source is coming from this file. So that's automatically imported into that file. So if I execute that script now, so this is example 3, no 4.
Oh.
Thank you. And then I just execute it. So the ampersand here is just to say, well, I just want to execute it. I could do something different. I could do a dot, and that would do the same thing as dot sourcing it. And when you dot source, it actually makes it it actually includes the content and execute it in your current session. Slightly different thing. I'm not going to go into the details of how PowerShell works today. I just want to show you to do this. So I'm just going to say, hey, execute this script. And it's not importing, it's just execute the script. And then from there, I can still change my event date, and then I will do something. Let's say, hey, it was, let's do like it was yesterday. Or last year, sorry, so in 20. And you see that still works the same way. So the content of this file, and I can show you doing just to prove. So I'm just showing you the content there. There's no magic. It's just using the dot source, right? It's the same thing up in there. But it dot source those functions, so those functions are available within that script, and then we can call this. All right, so that's so far how you do that with you start by writing a script, then your script gets more complicated. You write functions getting too messy to have in one file. So what you do is, while you split them into their own files, you dot source them. And it's much easier to manage. You can have, when you make a change, you change only one file. You don't have to change one big file with 1,000 lines. So it makes it easier to manage. But then now you have not only one script, but you have several scripts. You have, you have the script itself, which is this one, and you have several other scripts, which is much better to manage the source code, but it's harder to deliver. So let's say you want to run it into some of the machines, then you need to package it somehow. And then from the packaging, well, you need to zip it probably. What do? You're going to send an email and say, hey, can you just unzip that and run it? There's better ways of doing this. So what we're going to see now is, okay, so the better ways is to use module, but what is a module? So we'll go back a little bit and then see how we can start from that single file and then make it a module and then change from the module to see how we can package it as a module. So we go back to this example forward. We had one file. Actually, it was open, but I'll reopen here so it's clear for everyone. Okay, we had this file with parameters and then the functions, and then finally calling the function. So we'll start from the same thing, and basically we are only going to change the extension. Same thing here, exactly the same thing. We have the parameters. We just basically we just renamed. We simply renamed the file with PSM1. Pretty simple. So does it work the same? We're going to see that. So let's call it. Let's try to call it first. So if I do the same way as I was doing, say, hey, execute this file. So now it's example 5. And then it's my script. All right, what happens? So you're not going to see it because it's on my screen. Let me just bring that one up. It opened very nicely, Notepad. Very useful. I don't really want to see it. I just want to run it. So because it's a different extension, and that's the goal, it doesn't really work that way. You can't execute it that way. So a module is something you import and you can remove. And that's something you import to your session. So once you know that, instead of executing it, you say, hey, I want to import. Let's do the import module. All right, so it did write something. And the message is, okay, today is the blah, and I'm presenting PS module with sampler. Well, that's what I wanted, right? And I've provided no parameters so far, so that still works similarly, I would say, that what I did before. So from there, what do? Let me just make sure I get my notes right. So you've done that. So something happened. Let's try with the on date. So as we saw earlier, we could change the parameters. So the parameter was, let me just go back up there, event date. So it's .eve, and then I use tab to see EV. No, okay, that doesn't work. So when you use PowerShell module, you can't have what we call named parameters anymore. So those are not as user-friendly if you want to import it like this. But there's something which is called argument list, and that's a list of arguments. So the first one here, which is the event date. So if I try to do like this, and then I'd say, well, it was 2020, what is going to happen? Nothing. That's weird. Okay, now I just want to make sure you're all awake, except Raymond, obviously. Do you know what happened? If you know, just unmute or type it. Why is it not working? Any clue? I said no, Raymond. Okay, the problem here is, well, I already imported the module here. So as far as it's concerned, it's already loaded. But if I remove the module, which is my script with functions, and then I start this again, actually it works, and you can see, different color, different things. So it really took the argument I just told it. So the problem is, if it's already imported, it won't import it again, unless we force it to reload this module. And that's the great thing, actually, because when you have functions, you don't want to load the function in memory every time. You want to load the function and being able to call them. So if I run this again, it's not going to change, doesn't print anything. I changed the date. I changed the 2022, so it should go red because it's upcoming. Doesn't work, but if I add the dash force with it, and now it works. All right. So that's just to give a bit of an idea of what the module is. And now that I've got this module, I can look at what are my modules loaded in this current session. So I should see something which is my script with function in there. And obviously you can see it's there. And you can see some information. You can see the exported commands. At the moment, there's get pseuc message. There's the other one, which is show show pseuc message. You can see that the version is 0.0, which is kind of odd when you look at the others, but it's a script. It's just a script. So here we go. That is for this one. I can remove it again. It's the same thing. So remove my script with functions. And now if I do get module, you see it disappeared from that list. So far so good. I assume it's okay. And what we just changed is we changed the extension to from the script file to PSM1, but it's the same thing. We have a few functions in there, and then we have the parameters, and we just we can't really execute with the named parameters. We need to use the argument list, and then we need to do that with a list of argument, which is an array. So if I want to change only the presenter, I need to re-enter the first argument, event date, then the second argument, and override this one. So I'm going to just for this. So if I want to have the presenter to be Raymond, as an example, I need to still put the first one because it's an array. And okay, let's not change the date so you can see it. And it's going to be today. And you can see that has been changed to Raymond. So that's why, that's the difference. You can't use name parameter. You have to respecify every parameters until the one you really want to change. Anyway, when you have a module, it's usually not the way you want to work with it. So you still have this. At the moment, we just changed, we showed what a module is, and you can see I've got a different set of icons, which is called VS Code icons when you use VS Code. So you can just install it very easily for you. It's just an extension as well. And that tells me, you see that when it's blue like this, it's a PowerShell script, and when it's pink like this, it's a module file, right? And then if it's a data file PSD one, it's going to be red. and we'll see that in a bit. So I've got my simple script. It's one script, it's one module script, and functions in there. Now I want to have the same principle. I want to be able to split the files. I want to split the functions in different files because it's easier to manage when you have lots of code. So same principle as before. I'll just put them into a folder. I'll explain what public is. It's basically just a folder with some of the source files. And similarly to what we did before, I have my module PSM1, which I've renamed to be the same as the folder. And what I'm doing is, as we've seen before, I'm just dot sourcing it. So at the moment, I just say, hey, I've put some functions in public, some functions in private, and I'm just going to go through everything in there. So list everything in there. And so you see recursively can even be in subfolders. And then for each of them, well, I want to see what's going on. So write a message, and then what is the file I'm touching, and then dot source them. And that's what my module is doing. And then I have one module that is like this, and then I have my script. And my script file is not dot sourcing it anymore. It's just using that module. And then from using that module, it just imports it. So let me just kill this one, terminal, and then I'll create a new one just to make sure it's clean. And I will do the same as I did before. I have this script file I want to run, which will import that module. And I think it's this one, X5, no, X6. There we go. So it will import this module. What am I doing? I've reopened the same one.
Yes.
I've reopened the same one. I'll remove it. There we go. It will import this one, sorry, my module PSM1, which in turn is dot sourcing the files. So if we opened public, private has nothing in there, and public has two of them. The only slight difference between private and public is when I dot source them, I have this here for the public one. And then I'll go through this in a little bit. So now I just want to run my script, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to call whatever functions I had before. All right. So I'm calling this script now. So I'll do 6. Oops, sorry. And then my script calling module. All right. And you can see I've got this output there because I just wanted to make sure that you see that I'm importing the module into the session. That's a clean session because I just killed the terminal. And now it's loaded in that session. And then you can see that it runs this. And because these are parameters to my function, I can change the date, for instance, and it will be passed over there, event date, and then used into that function. So if I go here and I run this again, I can do event date, and then it was, oh, sorry, 909, and then we said 2020. There we go. And you see, I did a force there, and just so you see every time that it's importing the module. Is it clear? So far, so good? Raise hand if you don't understand what I'm doing so far. Okay, I'll carry on. So far, easy. We've created a module, which is this module here, and this module dot sources functions which are based on files from here. So you've seen I said, well, at the moment, when you import from public, we export the members. So let's say I want to have something not exported, so let's call it private. So I'm going to show you something first. Let's go back here and then for the module, import module, that's the shortcut, that's the alias. And then I'll just want to say, well, it's in example 6. I'll show you because I want to show you something else. And it's called my module. Okay, that's the folder. So what if I do this? Ooh, it did something. do pass through, so then you can see it actually did something. Hey, it actually loaded something, and you can see the exported commands are there, right? So automatically he knows that those two functions have been exported. So now let me move one of these into another folder, right? So that one should be private now. I'm going to remove my module first. And my module is my module. Why did I call it my module? Never do that. It's just for the example. And I'm going to re-import it again. So I'm going to report this. I'm going to do pass-through as well, so you see it. And you can see there's only one exported comments this time. So because of how my module is actually exporting the module members only if they're coming from the public folder, not the private one, that means the other function, which is get psug message, is not available there. So if I try, it doesn't recognize this command. The other one, sorry, the other one, however, is, oops, if I don't do a typo, just tab, there we go. So that one is seen, all right? So that's the notion where you have exported and not exported. Usually because of the object-oriented programming concepts, we call it private or public. And that's why usually people say private or public. And that's also why you've got nice icons in VS Code when you use the VS Code icons. All right, so that's one tricky way that you can do to do that. So now I have a module, which is one PSM. Oh, sorry, I wanted to close that. So I have my module, which is my PSM1, which is using two of the files, and which is actually stored into my module folder. Easy. We haven't solved yet the problem, which is how do we share this? And there's another thing that we haven't addressed yet is you can see that my script, my module doesn't have a version. So how do you add a version to this module? And the problem is, let's say if you have two of those available, do you know which one is the latest one? Well, you have to compare the versions. So if you share it, let's say, and don't do this, but let's say you zip it and you send 3 mail to someone, you may not know exactly which one it is because it doesn't show the version. So you can't even ask them. They will have to go through the code to see if it's got the new code or the old code, right? So how to do this is to add a PowerShell data file. So this one is just the PSM1, and we need to add a data file which says, hey, we will add some information to this file, and the information will be what we call a module manifest. So how do we create a module manifest? We already have the module. So let's just do new module manifest, and that's part of PowerShell. And then we want to say, where's the path to that module manifest? So I want to put it alongside my module.psm1. So I'll say, just go to example 6, and then it's going to be in my module folder. I want it there, and then it's going to be called my module.psd1. And then I want to generate the GUI automatically, so I don't have to say auto, it's me. I want to have what else? Company name doesn't really matter. Root module. Root module is okay. You define a data file, but then the data file can tell, okay, you import the data file, then now you need to look at the script file. So in this case, it's going to be my module.psm1. So I have to tell it to go and look for my module.psm1. Can type correctly. And this is relative to the PSD1 because we are going to put the PSD1 at the same level as the my module PSM1. Relatively speaking, it's just next to it. And hopefully I'm not missing anything.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important to name your PSM1 and PSD1 like your folder. So.
Yes. And I'll put a description. No, I'm not going to put a description, and you'll see why later. There we go. So now you see it just created that file, my module.psd1. And that's how I created it. It just says, hey, it's been generated today. And that's the data that it's got, and everything's there. Generated a GUI for me, filled up, filled up that. I didn't ask him, but you can customize this, and it's got some more information in there. Not many that we really care about. This one is important though. This is to say, well, every functions that you have in your script should be imported or exported, and you can be more restrictive about it, and we'll see that later. But at the moment, any function in the module, so any function defined in the PSM1, will be exported. So I'll leave that to this for now, and I will just make sure that I have a clean terminal, just so you see that there's no magic and it's not loading things from my previous session. I can do the same thing. Import module, example 6. My module. All right, so I just say that, and I say pass through because you should notice straight away. What am I doing wrong? Wrong in there. All right, let's try this. That's why.
Import.
I have to write correctly. That's why.
Yeah.
And that was the problem. And I wanted my pass through. There you go. Thank you, PowerShell, for letting me know I'm stupid. There we go. So you can see something already changed here. The version has changed. And the reason is in my module PSD1 now, I have a field which is called module version, and it's 001, which is cool. Let's say I release a new version, and I'm just going to import this, and I want to force, because if I do this, it still has it loaded, so it's still using the version 001. But then I've changed the source code, so I need to force to load it. Here we go. This is 002, as you can see here. All right. And it sounds really easy like this, but when you are several to contribute to one module, managing how you update the module version, if it's in source control, and when you release it, becomes more complicated. And if we have time today, which is not sure, but if we have time today, and if you're interested, we can look at, tools and automations we can use to manage the module version for us. So, so that's the basics for the modules with a PSD1. You have your folder, you have a PSD1, a PSM1, and then you have some data in there. The reason we separate those files is because it's much easier to manage when you make changes. The problem with those is the more functions you have in a module, the slower it gets to be loaded, because it needs to go through each files, and then it needs to load them in the session. And that takes some time, which is, PowerShell is relatively fast. So if you only have 4 of them, it may not be too much of a problem. But then if you want to sign your module, then it's also a problem, because you need to sign each file. So it takes longer as well. And it's just maybe not as neat in some regards. So that's something to bear in mind when you do it. But for managing the source, it's much better. So ideally, and I'm just saying that for later, ideally, when you edit your module and when you edit the source code, you want to have it in separate files. But when you run it, so when you distribute it and you run it, you want it to be into one PSM1. But at the moment, we've managed to create a module that's perfectly fine. So that's what we got here. So I just created that PSD1. You saw me doing it. And that's what the 7 is. It's just the same thing. And then we have the data here. So let me just remove those ones. So I collapse this just so I keep track. So that's my module, private, public, and my module PSD1 here and my PSM1 here. My PSM1 is still doing the same thing as before. The PSD1, so in this one, which I haven't shown in the one before, I've changed the function to export here to have my functions. So that is saying so the PSD1, the module manifest is just some metadata to say, well, that's my module and this is how it behaves. So it's better and it's a better practice to actually edit those functions to export with everything you would have in public. And you can see that if you move things around, well, you still have to come back here and update them. The reason it's better to define it in the module manifest, because you could have, if you don't want to specify it, because you're lazy or because it's just too much hassle, then you would do a star and that exports everything. But that's a problem, because usually you have a lot of things which are private, small functions that are only useful inside this module. So instead, you should say, well, that's the one I want to export, and I want to be selective about them.
And I think the other problem is that it's performance impact on PowerShell itself, because if you start the shell and you type something and you do tap, then PowerShell does the module autoloading. And if you have a star in your PSD1 file, PowerShell will scan all your files and looking for exported commands. And if you have many big modules, then the loading times will go down. So
yeah, the difference is in this case, when your module has the PSD1, it will just look at the PSD1 on these functions to export to say, hey, is there something listed in there which is that function? Like, let's say this one. If I had star for every module which has star, you would have to look, it would see there's a star. So it says, well, I can't tell you, so I need to load that module into a run space. So that means create the run space, load the module, check the exported commands from that module, and then you can say, oh, it's there. So then you need to go back into the right run space and load that module to be able to use that command. So it would take much more time. So if it's a small module, maybe that would just be, some hundreds milliseconds, maybe 100 milliseconds. But if you have a big module, or if you have many modules doing this, then that would definitely be a problem. In short, it's a bad practice. You have to define, if you think about it, you have to define it in there. The problem is it can be a problem to update, because if you change those, let's say you create a new file in the public, you need to go and remember to update this. And it gets annoying very quickly, because then you forgot to do it, you don't know why it doesn't work, and then you realize you just forgot to add, your function here. We say, hey, get my stuff from here. That's the only thing that was missing.
That's also some things that you can automate. So
yes, it's something that you can automate. Yeah. And there's a lot of things like this to manage, which needs to be automated. The module version, the function to export, something like the DSC resources to export when you write DSC resource. And then you have some private data like the pre-release, which is there. So if you want to use a pre-release, then that's also something that you will have to update there. So there's a lot of things like this.
I Thankfully, it's only necessary if you want to publish it to a gallery, PowerShell gallery, for example, I think.
Well, no, you can use it. You don't have to use the gallery to make use of it. It makes sense to use it only if you're using a gallery, yes. But that would mean you can have, something like this. That's a pre-release. So that's the pre-release tag, and that's the rest of the version here on the V, just to tell you it's a version. Usually you won't see it. All right. So that's my module. So I have a module which is created. It's got two folders. It's got a PSD1 and a PSM1. And when I call it with this. I just import the module, give the parameters, and call it. All right. So we've seen that so far. So the question is always, how can I redistribute? So how can I share this module instead of just zipping in and emailing it? And the answer to that is PowerShell module and PowerShell gallery. So how do you do this? Well, you have to publish that module somewhere, and the somewhere is a feed or a gallery. So in this example, I'm just going to do a repository which is there, just going to be this folder, right? So you can see at the moment this folder is empty, and we're going to look at these publish steps to just publish in there. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that my environment is not polluted. So I'm just going to run that script, but I am going to just make sure it stops after line 8. So I run my example 8. And then I want my publish, but it will stop line 8. So just make sure that this is what I've got configured. You know, I've got a get PS repository. At the moment, I only have the PowerShell gallery. And you can see www.powershellgallery.com/PIV2. So if I do find module automated lab as an example, it goes, you can see it's running something. He goes and he fetches it and say, hey, this automated lab, and that's the version over there. If I look for my amazing module, which is called my module, so I actually haven't done that, but that would be funny. I'm just going to, oh, okay, thank you. He doesn't find it, which is good. That means no one published something called my module. I was afraid for a minute that I published something like this before because I do this demo with my module very often. I haven't, which is good because it should not be into the production PowerShell gallery. So I've got this, so I can remove this, doesn't really matter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a local repository from this folder here. And then we're going to try to publish this module, so everything in that folder, into that repository. So how I do that, I just say, hey, that's my repository path, so my repo path is current folder, so my working directory. And then my child path is exit publish my local repo, which is this one. So let's go and do this. I'm going to do F8 to run this. And now that I've got this, I've got my repo path. I'm just saying, hey, let's register PS repository with the name psug, and then my source publish, script publish location, and to repo path, and then my installation policy to be trusted. So let's do this. Again, F8, takes some time, it looks like everything's fine. And then you realize that, okay, that should be good. So let's look at what are my PS repository now. And I still have my PS gallery, still trusted, probably shouldn't, but still trusted. And then I've got my psug, gallery, which is just this local folder. So if I do find module automated lab, and I want to be sure it looks at the repository psug, I'll do this. And then it's not finding it because I have absolutely nothing in my local repo at the moment. So far, so good? All right. So what we want to do now is to publish the module that we've created here. So this my module here, we want to publish it. So if I do get module, let's do get module, see what's loaded. Oh, there's a lot of things. Oh, because I'm in the integrated console. Fine, I don't want to be, there's too many things in there, it's just going to be confusing. So let's just go there and then rerun this. That's why it's in a script. That's why we write scripts. I'll just do it to make sure it's registered. Oh, actually, stupid. Is it there? Hello? I'm just checking which one is available. This is a new PowerShell session, as you can see, still not updated. It's still there because it's registered at the machine level, I would say, at least for this version of PowerShell. So I have got it there. I can just, publish the module, and my module is the name of the module I want to publish. So let's just get module, and then my module. It's not there, it's not loaded. So I know where it is. Let's go there and then X7, module PSD1, and then it's called my module, it's there. So if I import it and I pass through, I can see that I've imported it successfully and it's there. So now if I do my get module, it's there, all right? So let's try to publish the module to my psug repository. You can already see I've got my notes there, but I do F8 and it's going to tell me it doesn't find my module. So the reason for that is it's not in the PS module path. So he can't find it. Even if it's loaded, he can't find it because we can't just push it like this. So something you can do, one way of doing it, which I would say probably the one I recommend, is just to update your PS module path. So let's have a look at what the PS module path is set for this session. So I'll run just this. And you can see these are all the things that are currently loaded. So this folder, the X7 module PSD1, is not in there. So let's add it. So I have a few lines of code which just update the PS module path with what I just created if it's not there already. So I'm running this now, and I will show again my PS module path here. So let me clear that one up. And you can see now that I've appended this folder. So if I do get module, and it's my module, it's still loaded, it's there. I will remove. It's there. It's removed, sorry. So now if I do get module, it's not there, but I can do get module, list available, and then it finds it there, and you can see it finds it from this path. Right. So now it should find it. So let's go again and try again to publish. And I'll run this command again. And it's running kind of everything required me to, oh yeah. That's why I didn't put it earlier, because I wanted to show you that sometimes you want to publish to a gallery, but it's missing some information. And in this case, it's missing the description because I purposefully didn't update it. So if I go back to my source code and I look at my PowerShell manifest, and I can search for description. And you can see this one was commented out, so it's empty, but it can't be left empty. That's why actually I prepared that one. And if I try again, now that I've updated the source and I've saved the source, I can publish my module, and it is thinking about it, it's packaging it, and it's going to publish it to my repository, which is just a folder at the moment. So if you look down here, come on, little computer. It's very slow. I blame Teams. But to be fair, I've got Teams and I've got, here we go. And I've got OBS running as well to manage the camera that we don't use. So you can see that it created this file. Okay, what is this? New PKG. That's not my module, is it? Well, actually it is. You see my module dot version number dot new PKG. So new PKG is the NuGet package. Or NuPeg, or people pronounce it differently. But this is the NuGet package. And the NuGet package is when you package your module, it just takes everything, zip it up, and pretty much, add some information to it because of the NuGet, not protocol, but specifications. And let's just go reveal in File Explorer. I'll just try to show you this if I find where it's going to open it. Okay, they saw the. I just want to show you what a new PKG is. It's just, come back here. Sorry, went to the other screen. You can see it's there. Let's go full screen here. And basically that is just a fancy zip file. Oops, sorry. I said a fancy zip file. So if I go 7-zip, open archive, it goes on the next screen, obviously. But you can see that it's got my public, it's got some of the things that I didn't create. You see the new spec and some of the things, but that's the package. You probably don't need most of the time. You don't need to look at that, but it's good for you to know what it is and that you can just unzip a new PKG. And if you don't have 7-zip, you can easily just rename it to .zip and then open it to see what it's doing. Just to tell you, like, it's not magic. It's just creating a package which is based on NuGet. So know that I've got this module published in my local repo here, and I have my PS repository. So if you remember, get PS repository, and then I can show up both of them. If I do find module, and just to go quicker, I'll just tell it to search directly to the repository psug, not going to the gallery because we've checked there's nothing like this in the gallery. And I want the module name my module. It finds it. So now I can install it, or I will do something else. I will actually save it, which is similar thing. So if I save module, and I do name is my module, and then my repository is psug, and I want to save to the path, which is x8, publish. Not only it will download it, unzip it, and then you see it's the same module that I've created before. You see that the empty folder is not there anymore. It was empty, doesn't matter that much, but it's good to know. And it added this XML file, and basically this is used by PowerShell get, so the PowerShell bits that manage the modules, to say, hey, this module was downloaded from, and then this is some of the information. So it was downloaded from, and it should tell you somewhere. It says the repository is psug, and the reason for that is it will see that if you download it from psug and then another time you want to update it, but it comes from a different source, it's going to tell you that, are you really sure? Like, it's not going to let you do it because it doesn't know that source. It's not where you installed it from. So if you want to update it, but it comes from a different place, maybe you should make sure that you know what you're doing, pretty much. So that's what this file is about. But my module is there, and I can, very similarly as we did before, we can import my module, go to the publish location, and it's called my module. No, not the repo. I want just the module. See another thing here, it automatically appended the version. So if we do 03, it will install it with a subfolder 03. But for now, I'll just leave it here, and I just do import module. I forgot to do it pass-through, so I'll just do it again. And you see version 3 is there. So it still works the same way, and my module is there. So far, so good. I'll probably make a pause now because I've been going on for a long time, and then I will take a few questions before I go to the next bit.
Do you have any questions, Gael?
Yeah. Just unmute, ask questions, and just unmute as well and tell me, okay, that's easy. We've been doing that for a long time. Tell me that as well. I just want to know. I don't know the audience. I don't know if it's new to you or if like half of it is new, 10% of it is new. Tell me. Don't be so shy.
I've learned something, Gael. I didn't know that you can register a PS gallery in a local folder. Nice. For testing purposes, very effective. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
For testing and for testing and for.
I showed that in my user group before, so that's the easiest thing to register a repository. That's really cool.
Indeed. But it reminds me that there is always something new in these kind of sessions. Always.
Yeah, same as me. Yeah, I didn't catch that we need to be in the BS module path. This is something, and I always thought we need a share for that, not only the file system.
Yeah, and it's good to know because as you've seen, it validates as well the manifest, the module manifest. So it does some checking for you that otherwise it doesn't do. And I've discovered that a while ago now, but it's very useful when you forgot, let's say, to add the description to it, which I don't always do when I just, experiment with the module. All right, so that was the normal path. You start doing a module, you go from a simple script, you expand the scripts to functions, from functions to different files, from different files to a module. I know you know how to package the module, and then you can publish it to a gallery that you can use and distribute. So in this case, this gallery is just the gallery that is on my local system. You could do with a UNC share, so SMB shares, UNC share, and then you could do something similar. Best is still to use an actual NuGet repository, so over HTTPS, and you could use things like Inedo Proget, or you could use Artifactory, JFrog Artifactory. They do very good, either cloud-based or on your server-based. NuGet server. You could, so Chocolatey, as an example for package management, is based on the same protocol, so the same specs, which is NuGet 2. So if you use Artifactory as an example, you can have one gallery for PowerShell modules and another gallery for your Chocolatey packages, a repository for Chocolatey packages. That's the same technology, you can do this. And then JFrog or Proget or any of those, they can do other types of packages as well. And when you are in a corporate environment, that's very important because you don't want to be downloading from the internet. You want to be downloading from something you trust. And Artifactory is an example, and I know the others do that as well. They allow you to have one repository that you use for everything, which is not the PowerShell gallery, but you can proxy the request to the PowerShell gallery, and you can limit what packages are available. So let's say I create an Artifactory feed. So I have an Artifactory server, and I say, hey, I want my PowerShell feed, and I call it psug, just to take the same thing. I register psug, and I unregister the PS gallery. I can make that in Artifactory, I can make that psug repository to provide the local packages that I push to it, but also proxy the one that are from the gallery from the same source. So automatically, I have nothing to do if I just do. Let's say it's an Artifactory feed. If I do find module in my repository psug and I say automated lab, it could find it from the PowerShell gallery for me. So basically, the Artifactory server is doing the proxying for me. And that's very useful because you don't want to reproduce everything. Probably you just want to proxy a limited number of modules that you trust, and you trust the source. Let's say the Azure ones from Microsoft. You want to proxy them as an example. So you could do it that way. And that could be the subject of another talk. But it's been already going for a long time. So
that would be my next question. How do proxies that?
Yeah, so it's actually quite easy, and they have a document. It's well documented in Artifactory. You can do something similar in Ego Proget. The only problem with Ego Proget, as far as I remember, is the caching. They may have some issues with caching. So sometimes you do find module, and then instead of finding one, it finds two. And that's a caching issue. So sometimes I don't use the caching in Proget, and that's a problem because then every time you want a module, it has to go and fetch it, which is a bit sad for a proxy. But otherwise, they do similar things. And maybe they fixed it since, because I haven't used that for probably over a year and a half or something. So yeah, so that was just PowerShell module. What about sampler? And when you do all of these things, when you create modules, sometimes getting started is hard. And there's loads of ways that people in the community, so some of us create a module every week, or at least a lot of modules during the year or over the time. And then if you are doing this at work, it also takes a lot of time. The problem is sometimes people say, well, I have one module which, I'm going to cram everything into that modules that my company needs. And that ends up being huge modules and not very maintainable because they have everything, a bit of everything. So some to manage AD, some to manage, user things. And then you need to make sure, it's on every machine that you need. But maybe some stuff is for security specific things and not for AD management, and you don't want to have everything in one. So you need to have several modules, and those several modules, well, it's hard to every time do it manually, I would say. So there's a lot of toolkits around there, and use the one that works for you. But I can name a few that help you creating modules quicker, that helps you providing features to your modules, or just manage the workflow of the modules. And the one I have in mind at the moment, so Stucco from Brandon Olin, aka Dev Backups, he's created one which is called Stucco. He's the maintainer of Sake, another module which is a task runner. So he went that direction, using Sake and the task runner to create a module. There's another one that is I forgot the name now. Press is another module by Justin Grote, I believe. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing the name right, but he is so he's created that quite recently. Actually, it's based on Invoke Build, another task runner, And it helps you as well doing those things, creating the modules, managing the module, and then doing some of the publishing tasks for you as well. And there's one from Fred, which is the PS module framework, if I'm correct.
PS module development.
Yeah, he's got a lot of things which are PS module, so then I'm always a bit confused with which does which. But yeah,
we had him on with this module already.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then similarly, I've created one, and I have a very specific use case. So I'm part of the DSC community, and so I don't, as far as I'm aware, none of these other modules were managing DSC resources and some of the hard requirements we have for the quality of the DSC resources were not integrated. So some of them is script analyzers. So I'm sure some of them have it, but not all of the things that we specifically need and when we needed it. So we've created Sampler, which is another way to start a new module. So let's go to this now. So how to create a sampler module. So the idea with sampler is it should be easy to get started with the module, and the module should have lots of the features, especially in the DSC community, which is what I'm going to show you now, but it doesn't have to be specific to the DSC community. So what do we do for that? Sampler is a module, so you just install the module. Let me just remove that. And I will just quickly show you how to get started with a module. And so you install the module sampler. I'll release force current user. I've already done that, so just using force. And then you import that module when it's done. Should have run that script. So it's loading it, downloading the thing. I do a pre-release because one of the releases is not a full release yet, but that's the latest available. There we go. So now I import it, and then I can look, okay, what are the commands in sampler? And a lot of those things you don't need. There's 2 commands you need, but I want to show you there's a lot of features that sampler provides, which is around code coverage management, finding the module that you've built and things like this. And I'm going to give some more details. But the one you really need to know is either add sample, and we're probably not even going to cover this today. It's only when you have a module and you want to add something else. And the real one is just new sample module. So let's use the new sample module. What are the parameters you need to provide? You need to provide the destination path. So where do you want this module to be created? And the same as when we create the module manifest, you know, the module name, the module author, module description, the module type, and in this case, it's just DSC community. There's a few others. There's simple module, complete module, and some of the things. I won't dive into the details which one does what. The key idea is you may have different, you can cherry pick which one you want when you want to specifically pick which features you want. Otherwise, if you really want to follow the DSC community, which is, you know, there's a few dozens of modules out there using this template, and they are good examples if you want to start it. So that's why I'm going to use that one today. So I just run this, and then let's see what happens. So I'm just saying, you see the destination path is X sampler. So it's going to do something in there, and as it does it, you should see it. So running the new sample module, oh yeah, he asked me the question. So that's an example. If you don't provide some parameters and some parameters are mandatory, it will ask you. And in this case, it says you, well, the default branch is main. So if you use Git, and if you're familiar with Git, you know that before the former default was to call your main branch master. This has changed, and your main branch is, in GitHub at least, and a lot of others have followed suit, it's main. So this is why it's asking, because it can support to have it called master instead, but it's better to go with the defaults that you would have in GitHub. And you can configure that on GitHub as well as on the other things. But you say, hey, main, I just press enter because the default is main, and that's fine with me. And then it goes and creates all the files and everything I need. And you can see on the side here, it created my folder. It's creating the files, and it already starts to add all the automations I need. my source is where I define my module. Here. I've already prepared everything so then to have tests and unit tests specifically. So if I wanted, I could just go in there and then change, add a test for my public functions or test for my private functions, and it will run them. So that's when we go to pester, probably another time, another talk, if we want to go there. But the source, you have the PSM1 as we discussed, and you have the PSD1 here. The difference is the PSM1, there's nothing in there. And the reason is, it shows you one example, but the reason is technically you don't even need that because it will be generated. And I'll show you how later, as in what it does. And then my PSD1 is there. As you can see, it's already populated some of the things for me. You see the description here. This can't be empty. That was one of my parameters. So everything is ready for me to create. So the only thing it doesn't do, it doesn't write the functions for me, which is good because we've already done it. I just want to mention that classes, you may or may not want to use PowerShell classes. I'm just going to remove them because in this example, we're not going to do it. Same for enum and Wikisource. Wikisource is if you want to have some documentation, and this can automatically do it for you. This automation can do it for you. I'm not going to cover that today, maybe another time. So I'll remove those two folders, and then what I'm left with, this NURS, just to have some about help, which is good to add in your module, but I guess most people forget to put that. So when you do about my module, then you can get help for this, and that tells you a bit. So you need to update it, update the descriptions, the examples, and things like this. I'm not going to do it today, but it's there. And well, I probably should add, some public and private functions. So let's go back to the module I created earlier. Sorry, mouse problem. There's a bit of a lag. All right, I'll just take exactly those two folders, actually just this one. So I just copy this and directly drop it into my source here. Paste. All right. So that's my source code. You've seen already those files, but now I want to create that module. So here it's the source, and you can see it's not the name of the module. The key here is when we use sampler, one of the best practice is to, and I mentioned it earlier, when you write the functions, you do one functions per file, but when you use the module, you do everything within the PSM1. And how is it done is there's a compilation time if you want when you run the build, and I'm going to show you how to run the build. It just build the module, put everything into the PSM1 and does that for you. So I'm going to run it as is, so then you see what's happening. I'm just going to go into that folder because then I'm going to work from there directly. Sorry. So from here, oops. Oh yeah, it's my module as well. So here, this is where I've got everything. So I do build, and then I'll just do like this for now, just so you see what's happening. So the first thing, it bootstraps your environment. And by bootstrapping, that means it will download all the modules it needs and the dependency it needs to make sure it does the process. So for you, there's nothing to do. It's just going to go fetch whatever is needed for it to do its job, and then it's going to do it for you. And some of these modules say it's going to download the latest PS script analyzer. It's going to download pester for you. It's going to download whatever is defined in the dependencies, the required module dependencies here. So it says, hey, I want you to download all of these, invoke build, PS script analyzer. You don't need all of those, but it's good to have, this is a good example to say, okay, that's what we do in the DSC community. We use a lot of modules to split the work or the automations we're doing. And you can see a lot of this is DSC specific, just to show you a complete example here. So it's using PSDepend, which is one of the modules you downloaded, to be able to fetch all the dependencies. And then it will automatically download, not install, because I don't want to pollute your environment. So it will download them into the required modules folder in the output, which is not saved in the repository. And it will just add them there and then make them available for the build. And when this is done, it will start compiling your module, and we will see what it does. and put that into a PSM1, PSD1, copy the files it needs, and create that into the output. So the automation is done by the script. And I just let it run. It takes a few minutes.
So just one question that I have.
Yeah.
If I use, say I have a public function that depends on module X, do I have to put it into the in the file that you were just one minute ago, though, the dependence, so the PS depend file?
Yes. So
okay.
I will show you. There's different things. It depends what you're doing.
Okay.
But if you use it as a required modules in your module manifest, probably best is to have it there so then it's loaded in your system when you need it.
Okay.
But it's not gonna do anything with it. In this case, it will just download it so it's available in your environment. The benefit of doing this is if you work on this module which has a dependency on another module, if someone else just clone your repository, they may not have it installed on their machine, that module that you have a dependency on. So by doing this, then automatically you say, well, if they work on my module, they can download this module and make it available there so then they see when they test.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
And that's how it's used. So if you're familiar with something like NPM or .NET Restore, these kind of things, that's the same principle. That's the idea. You set up your environment, your dev environment if you want. So in Python, that's a virtual environment type of thing. If I go, so none of these is installed. Okay. All of them are just saved.
Now I get it. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
It's just saved here. And you see there's Pesta and there's some of the things that we need. And there's a lot of automation going on there. So you probably not need all of those every time. And I will show you how you change it. But that's the default when you do the DSC community one, which is a very specific use case. So there's a red thing and I'm going to show you what it is. And then you see it does Pesta test automatically. And you will see what the defaults are for this. I'm just going to go back here. It's going to start running Pesta. All right, and then it's going to fail. Why? Because it says code coverage failure. You have 0% code coverage because the threshold is 85%. It just tries to, by default, tell you, well, you should make sure you have tests and you cover your PSM1 with your tests. That's the idea. But you can set it to 0 to make sure if you don't have any tests. So we're going to do that. So we can configure some of this information from the build YAML. We go in there, and then there's a code coverage, which was set to you see it's set to 85. Let's go to 0 because there's no test, and I'm not going to write them right now. So that was one of the errors, and then you have some other errors, which was the DSC resource is going to be fine. So you haven't seen this, but I know about it. It says, I can't find the DSC resource. Same thing, this is because this template is specific for DSC resource. So we say we need to copy this file. So let's do that. And now I'm going to show you the same automation. We already run once. I changed the build YAML to say, hey, we changed the way we build it. But it's already downloaded all the files that we were missing. So now it will not import them again. It just runs the build. So it's running the build, it's building the module, and I'm going to show you what the output looks like. And this build will be successful, you see, because there's no code coverage anymore. It's skipped because we've set it to 0, which is not there. So what does the build module look like? So, oops, sorry, that's the output. So in the output now, I have the required modules that we downloaded earlier that you've seen, the test results. So the output of Pesta that run, it's going to be pretty empty in there, obviously, because we have no tests. But then we have the my module, which is the one we created, and that has the PSM1, the PSD1, and the PSM1, if you look inside, it has all the functions that have been assembled together. It's a compilation, if you want. And we can see there's some region made for us, so we know where it's coming from. So it's coming from the public folder on that PS1 file. And that gives you some information. There's other things in there. So, and that's more for Constantine. It's much more advanced, and I'm not going to go into much details, but sometimes you have a dependency and you want to embed that dependency instead of having it in the required modules. And this is what we're doing here. You see in my source, I only have an US public. So that's my source. But then if I look at my output there, I have NUS modules and then out of there. So the modules there, it's another module, which is DSC resource.common. And that's the way we embed it. But that is coming from the gallery. And then we just copy it inside. So then when we ship this module, it's already it's a nested module if you want. And that could be useful, especially when you do DSC resource, because DSC resource doesn't fetch dependencies.
I think it can also be useful for secret management, I think. Because you do, if you write a secret management vault, I think you also make use of the nested module, so that it can be also useful.
Yeah, it could be. So there's different use cases as well, and sometimes it's just because you want to have everything in one, so then it doesn't need to fetch. So it's useful to do that. That's one way of doing it, I would say. Not always the best case. And the way it's done, it's here pretty much. You say, hey, that's my nested module. I want this one, so it needs to be available as well. So it's the path, required modules, DSC resource common, and it just copies it. It doesn't add it to the manifest if you set it to false, and it excludes the file you want, in this case, ps get module info, because that's when you download it. So if I just comment this one out, and then again, run the build. And when I run this build, it runs everything, including the tests. There's ways to run just the build. I'm going to show you that next. But that one, it does everything. So I make a change and I make sure that my tests still pass when I made that change. So every time I do this. So now if I look at my output, I have a different module here. And you see that the modules folder is not there anymore. We removed it. But, you know, the content there is still correct and still the same.
Another question about PowerShell help. So if you write PowerShell comment-based help, does this module also create the cap files and so on for updatable help?
So you want to generate the MAML.
Yes.
And
yes.
So it's not documented, and Sampler actually has some functions to do it, but it's not documented yet because the workflow that we have is not perfect. So the problem when you do command-based help is you can do it's easily to generate the command-based help from to generate the MAML from the command-based help. That's relatively easy to do, and we have this part. The problem is the DSC resources must be translatable. So when you do this, because command-based help, it can very easily generate the MAML, but then you can't generate MAMLs with different languages. And one of the problem with this is how PowerShell works. If you have command-based help, it will take precedence over everything pretty much. So if you do that and then you provide the MAML, it's still going to be the command-based help. Even if you translate the MAML, it's going to be wrong. So the better workflow is to use Platypus.
Yeah.
So then you can write it in YAML, and then it will generate the MAML, and you can embed the MAML. We haven't finished, so we also support that, but we haven't finished the workflow completely, so it's probably undocumented as well. But that's typically the kind of features Sampler is providing. And something I'm not showing here is I showed you the quick way to do that locally, and there's a lot of tasks that you can customize or you can use. And they are defined, actually, I'm going to show you them first, in the YAML. You have different files that comes from different modules, but then you have different workflow. And that's what I mentioned, which is workflow. By default, it's the .1, so it runs the build, then run the test. But there's other things that you can run. You can run just the build, and I'm going to show you that straight away. I did build, so I run one specific task, and I just want to run the build. So just running the build is not going to run the test. These still runs the pre-build and the bootstrapping if you want, just in case it's not there. And then it's just going to run the build, which is going to be quicker. So cleaning up the output and rebuilding the module without running the tests. So it's faster. And you can run, any of those, and you have something else. So in this case, and that's something that Raymond probably doesn't know, because otherwise he would have noticed that you can do that locally. So when you run the build ps1-tasks and then you do a pack, it's actually going to create the new pkg file the same way as we've seen before, and it will be directly in your output. So here, sorry, yeah, come on. And then, so it built the module. So in that one, it does the module as well. But so it's rebuilding the module, which is now done. And then it should start publishing just there, the new pkg. It always take, zipping the file seems to take some time. Tick tock, tick tock. Come on. So the benefit of having it through the same command and having everything being able to load like this, if you git clone a repository, you can run this and it will download the dependencies you need. You don't need to install anything. It's just based on the files that are there. It tells everything is there. Go and fetch those information and use it. And you can see the my module 001 new pkg has been done here. So it's good to test if things are working fine. And we have all the automation. So if we want to run this in Jenkins, if we want to run this in any other CI tool, Azure DevOps or whatever, you can just run the same automation. And actually, we also provide a good example that you need to customize, but it works when you use the default, I would say. A good example of Azure Pipeline and how to use this. We have everything defined in the YAML here. And I'll do another video a bit more advanced on sampler, like we do small videos, but more advanced on sampler to show you when you have this, it's very easy to add it to Git and then just make it sure that it just runs in your Azure DevOps. Do you have questions? Because that just went from basic PowerShell module to very advanced things that does a lot of things for you. You can ask Raymond. So Raymond, if you unmute, and then you can tell them your experience with it and what kind of module you're using and stuff like that.
It's pretty crappy, actually, isn't it? So we wish that we have seen this whole solution earlier, because in Automated Lab we are suffering from a lot of these kind of legacy ways of doing things. Like you have to manually maintain the list of functions you want to export. You have to manually maintain lots of things in the PSD1 file that Sampler takes care of. So all the new stuff we are building on Sampler, and I would say if you take yourself 4 or 5 hours, then you should be ready to use it, and it saves you a lot of time, especially if you want to move to a build system like Jenkins or Azure Pipelines, and want to have something that is automatically deploying into a gallery. So I could really recommend it. The only negative experience with it is that it sometimes moves a bit faster than the documentation, but I think that's the issue with all the open source projects.
Yeah, there's a big push that actually Johan was a big contributor on the Sampler, part of the DSC community as well. He updated the documentation like a lot very recently, so feel free to give feedback because a lot of documentation has been updated in the README on the module. We could do better.
I didn't even give it another try because I thought there was nothing new, so I will do. Okay.
There's a lot of things, and I'm going to go maybe show a little bit. I forgot to show that, and thank you for bringing it up. So. You know that I didn't even change in the source, which I opened. Okay, so that's the compiled. So that's the source, right? The source here, I haven't touched it and I didn't mention it, but automatically Sampler, when you build, it will automatically update it with whatever is in public. So that is already done for you. And there's a lot of these kind of things which is done for you. And there's a lot of cleverness that we learned that we need to build over time that went into that module. And I'll bring the page for Sampler because there's a lot of things going on that I don't have time to show you. Let me just create something else. Ooh, Teams is really slowing me down right now.
I just wait for the new Teams version to be public.
I am. So that's the repository. So first thing is, if you look at the number of releases we had, you can see that we've went through a few iterations. It's been 200 and 12 releases. So that's, yeah, there's a fair few. And the last one was, not even a day ago. If it fails here, it's because the code coverage is not up to what we want it to be. We'll get there, but not just yet. And a lot of those things are automated. So we only have to commit changes, and automatically it will go on Azure DevOps, build it for us, and give us some report and some information. Some of the things very useful when you have on GitHub like this, the automation is it will manage all of this for you. It will manage the version. We don't change the version numbers. It's done with something called Git version. So based on where you are with Git, it does that for you. It will publish for you these reports of what the release is about. So every time you make a pull request, you have to update your changelog in a certain way, which it's also checked to make sure it's valid. And then automatically, when you publish a new version, it will create this. And when you release the full version, so the next full version would be 0112.0, not the pre-release tag. It will send back a pull request to GitHub to say, hey, you've changed your version now, so you need to update your changelog with these new things. And that's automated. And there's a lot of things you can do. You can create your own task and your things, but a lot of it is done for you. It also tags your repository. As you can see here, there's a tag in GitHub, so it's easy to see where you're at when you do your Git log. And what else am I missing? There's a lot of things going on. Oh yeah, I can show you this as well. So we're using codecov, which is something else, which tells us the code coverage that we have, and then why it shows it's failing is because we are below 70%. But there's a lot of code in there. But you can see that everything else still works there. So the pipeline is done here, and you can see that in Azure DevOps pipeline, we have one task which build the modules, and then it can test the modules on Linux. It tests it on Windows PowerShell Core, Windows PowerShell, and also on macOS. So we make sure that it works across all the things. And this is based on the code which is there. And you can see the Azure DevOps pipelines configuration, which is somewhere here. So Azure pipelines here. And that tells you exactly how we're using it. And there's a lot of things going on in there. The version is calculated automatically by something which is called Git version. It's common, it's not specific to PowerShell. So you need to install that, but you can install it through Chocolatey or something else. And there's pipelines. It's a bit complex to understand, but you can see the Git version YAML there. And there's a lot of things you need to understand when you use Git version. You need to understand Git a fair bit. But I should do a video specifically on that at some point.
Yeah, that would help, because Gael, this is the only stuff that, so the changelog management and the Git version is making trouble quite often. And I'm wondering, do you need to recreate a project at some point in time because sampler has changed too much, or should it always be upgradable or not even recognizable if sampler has done something different?
So Git version on these things, they're not changing. That's not the problem. If we, at the moment, so if you're familiar with SEM versioning, so semantic versioning, you know that the way you specify your version has a meaning. That's what semantic versioning is about. And the rough idea is, So the rough idea is sample preview, the version is 0, and if you do the full version, having the full version, the stable version, if you want, is 0.111.8 without a pre-release, right? So if you start with 0 here, that means anything can change. We don't guarantee there won't be a breaking change. If you are on, so if you look at the changelog, it will show when there's something that changed. We will say, hey, this change is a breaking change, and you will still see it, but it's not going to bump the major version. And we did that because there's two behaviors that we really wanted to make sure were not built in. We want, like, before we go to version 1.00, there's two things that we really wanted to do, and we've done one of them. The one we've done is extracting everything GitHub specific into a specific module. So now when you want to do all this GitHub automation, you need to make sure that, and I'm going to show you in this sort of, where's my, did I close? Sorry. Oh, no, it's there.
Works.
Sorry. It's because, yeah, that's the one I was looking for. But it's not the color I usually use. So I was confused. So when you want to use some automation that comes from another module, you say use the tasks. Use the tasks from something else. So in that case, for GitHub tasks, GitHub specific tasks, we say, well, use this module sampler.github tasks, and then load the task in that way. So that's the way invoke module works. And that means you can create your own tasks specific to your company. If your company is using, say, Jenkins, you can create a module with some task in there, which is invoke build tasks, pretty common. You can customize them like this. You can do it in other ways, which are documented or less documented, but basically that's just one way of doing it. So we wanted to split them because in a company's environment, many people don't use GitHub. So they don't need to have all of those tasks within the sampler module. They could be into a different module. And that's why we wanted to extract, I would say, from sampler. Before it was within sampler, and now it's outside of sampler, which is much better for everything. So no, the other thing we want to make sure before we hit version 1.0.0 is we want to make sure the code quality just goes up. So validate a bit more things. We're really getting there, we're really close. But yeah, so they've been in the past, I think, 3 breaking changes since we started. One is the one I showed, which was documented on dsccommunity.org. And that was in the blog. So the last, that was the last one, and that was the GitHub task, and we knew that was a breaking change, but that was obviously something big. So that one was when we extracted it. If you were using GitHub automation, so create a release and things like this, that would have probably broken your script because some of the tasks were from a different module, so you had to update the YAML I've just showed you. Yeah. To have this. Otherwise, usually we just try to, because we have this model where everything is within a module, and because you use a PSDepend to automatically load those modules, and when you run this in your CI environment, it will automatically pick the latest one, so it's completely transparent to you. It will just pick the latest one, and then it will just work. The only time, like when we changed quite big the structure, and we've done this for the GitHub task, and doing this meant a lot of changes in sampler. There's a lot of things that has changed, but just because you had to change the configuration here, that's why it was a breaking change. And I agree that we should probably have a better way to notify people using this that this is why there's a change. But it's quite rare, and I know it happens, and I know it's frustrating when it happens. But you know where to find me. So if you have any question, I'm always on. And actually, I am probably too many times, too long for a day. But I'm on the PowerShell Slack, mostly in the DSC channel, but I'm around, I would say. So aka.ms/ps Slack. And then you can join the PowerShell Slack from there. And they also have a bridge with Discord, so aka.ms/ps Discord. Hopefully that answered the question. Especially you, Raymond, you have no excuse. But usually we really try, because we have, I don't know how many repositories we have, but we have lots of repositories for the DSC community using this. I'm not saying we're doing a perfect job. It's still something we do on the side, but because we have a fair number of repositories using this, so we try to minimize the breaking changes. So at the moment, there's still a few changes that we want to do. Hopefully, they're not going to be breaking changes, but until we finish them, we just want to, you see, there's 90 repositories, and out of them, there's maybe, I don't know, I would say 50 that are using this, and they're used on an almost daily basis. Anyway, So yeah, there's a few changes that we want to do, and before we say, okay, that's V1, and we just want to go them on. Mostly it's quality, so cut coverage and quality of the templates that you've seen at the moment, which the last pre-release version, the one I used tonight, actually already has lots of changes. So it's already cleaner, and there's just a bit more cleaning to do. So I'm going to ask Roman to do it. Any question? Would that be useful? So I would say that might be more advanced. And there's a lot of concepts that are important to understand. So if you start using PowerShell heavily in your organization to automate things, you will want to have not necessarily this one, but you will want to have a clear pipeline that's easy to reproduce, because you will create, one module for managing something, and then you will create another module. And every time you have this, you want to make sure they all behave the same way. And when you update something, whether it's the automation, the task, or something, it's just quicker and it's quickly to deploy. If you use this system, whether it's this module or not, but if you use this system where it pulls the dependencies at runtime and you run this on a CI server, you don't have to go on your CI server, RDP onto it, install the module before it can actually run the automation, because I've seen it too many times. This one just says, hey, you define this within your repository, and it will pull the dependencies at runtime only in your virtual environment, and it will build it from there. And that's why it can be run in a container. You don't care, and that's what we're doing when we use Azure DevOps pipelines. It's just a container. One is a Linux one is a Windows one, and like this, on macOS as well.
Yeah, the steps that I do when I build a module with Azure DevOps, I install the dependency first with install module and then build the module. But that could be a better thing just to call the build step that will resolve the dependencies automatically, and then continue on, because installing some modules can take some time. And if you can do that in one step all together, then this could be a really good solution.
Yeah. And remember that the main value I would say is this has been going on, and there's a lot of commits as well. I don't even show you the number of commits, but there's a lot of things going on. And just having the pattern to be able to update this so often, and then with several people working on this, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort. But then we managed to get to a workflow that allows tiny changes. And then when you have a tiny change, then you just push you commit the change, create a pull request, you run the test, you say, hey, it's okay. And then someone reviews it so that you have quality, and then it creates a pre-release. And then you have that pre-release there. You can say to some people, say, hey, can you just try this one to make sure it works? And that's why you have pre-release there. And then when everyone says, okay, the pre-release works, so then we promote that pre-release. So v11.2. In this example, it's going to be promoted. The preview 001 will be promoted to the full version, v111.2.
Just another question. I see your Azure Pipelines file is somewhat very big, just getting out of control, I think.
No, it's not. So that's a choice, because we wanted to show everyone like it's in one file.
Okay.
That's the main reason.
Okay. So I do a lot of pipelines in Azure Pipelines, and I normally go and template them, so to split them in multiple files to,
we could
get a better feeling for this. Yes.
We could, but the problem is if you create, so we really thought of that, and we thought that would be a good idea. If it was just for us, we would have done that way. But because that's something that anyone can reuse, and there's also a good reason is we want people to be able to fork the repository and then build the fork into their own project. So we want to have everything in there. And we don't want to have to manage templates, to have to explain templates. Yeah. And maybe someone will just want to run something in Jenkins or with TeamCity, which actually I've done it with TeamCity before. And actually I've done it with Jenkins as well. But the idea is we want it to be flexible. We're just providing the example for Azure Pipelines because that's what we use. And there's a fair bit going on, but everything is in there except from the secret variables that we put in the pipelines.
But I think that it's also documented, I think. what you put in or variables?
Yes.
Okay.
It's in there. So in there you will see for this one, you see environment is
okay.
GitHub token and things like this, and it just takes it from the environment. So we put it like this. And yeah, there's a few things that we need to improve in there as well, but it already does a lot of things for us. Actually, Microsoft is also using this, but it's cheating because I worked with them for the repository. So guest configuration module is using sampler. So it's basis.
I think you built it for them, the sampler project, is that right?
No, sampler itself started a long time ago, which I had something called sample module, and that was 6 years ago, maybe.
Okay.
Something like this. And I started just experimenting with invoke build. And then as I was going with invoke build, I used the same templates to start with DSC, which was called DSC infrasample. And then from there, that evolved even further with a sampler, which was actually done, I can't remember for who it was. It was probably mainly for me initially, and then it's been used everywhere I worked pretty much. Okay, yeah. And then yes, a lot of the automation was built for them for the DSC community. Yes. Yeah, a lot of the features, not the concept initially.
Do you have any other questions for Gael?
Just a comment, I'm demonstrating this to almost any customer who is doing a PowerShell workshop. Unfortunately, most of the enterprises are not ready yet, at least not the ops departments, because they are thinking too much in the old-fashioned ways. But I think 6 or 7 about them have adopted the concept and are creating every project with the sampler so far, and there was no negative feedback at all. On the contrary, they say that it takes so much control of all the things that you usually have to do manually that it's a really big time saver. Of course, take yourself a couple of hours to get into it, but then it does a lot more things than you would expect.
And I know several consultants that also use that now. But yeah, that's the point, right? It saves time eventually, and it does a lot of things. Like it's prescriptive in some ways, which is how you separate your files, how you separate your classes and your things like this. But it is for a reason, is because we've tried other ways, and the other ways had problems, and that's why we usually narrow down to a path. And I'm not the only one. I use a lot of the knowledge from the community. I'm not saying that we built all the features in there. We just reused what was in the community. So the changelog management is someone that wrote the module. The module building is from Module Builder by Gael, so Joel Bennett, who's done an amazing job. We contributed back to this one, so we tried to help and tried to shape a little bit for your use cases like DSC resources or things like this. But all in all, it's coming from the community. And when PSD-Pen is from Warren, and then there's a lot of things like this that just comes from different parts of the community. The GitHub integration is actually based on the PowerShell for GitHub modules by Microsoft. All of these things is just a lot of dependencies, and that's why using this module is made to be using different modules, so then you don't have to rewrite everything yourself. If, let's say, someone was to create some invoke build task, so we use invoke build, again, that's one of the dependency. Someone was creating or already created some invoke build task for something specific to their environment, they could just reuse it straight away with what we have. They just have to plug so that the right variables are used, but that's how we're doing it.
One thing, I think you didn't mention it yet, is PS script analyzer, so enforcing code style quality as well onto the project. So this is what many companies are suffering from. Each department, each individual is doing code in a different way. And with Sampler, you also have one definition file where you can choose how code should look like. And this is really being enforced and make sure that whatever is the artifact looks as expected.
Yes.
Also very useful.
Yeah, so it's a little bit late, so I don't want to spend too much time on it. because it's been going, I've been going, I can go on and on, but it's been 2 hours already. I'm just going to show you quickly that, okay, if you're, so I've created my module and I've just opened, the my module folder, which is what you would have. And within that, in the VS Code, you have the analyzer settings that's already doing things for you in there. And there's some configurations there. So we have things which are pretty populated for people to use, I would say. And amongst those, we have PS script analyzers. So whenever you write source code there, so let me just go. So that's the integrated console. I'm just going to make sure it loads, I would say, sorry. I'm just making sure it loads at the right build environment variable. So that's something it does when you run the build. So the no op is just to say run no task, just the initial bit, the bootstrapping. So when you do that, you actually change for you in your session the environment variable, the PS module path I was talking about. And that's something you don't have to deal anymore with it. And that's why we can save the modules and everything will be set up for your environment. It's not going to be at your machine level, so it's not going to pollute your environment. And when you've done that, then if VS Code allows me, I'll try to do some things that maybe PS Script Analyzer doesn't like. So is PS Script Analyzer going to kick in? I don't know. I think it's probably going to take some time. Here we go. So you see that's PS Script Analyzer already starting things. So it says, hey, you're doing things wrong. And there's a lot of things wrong in there. And I know because that's not the way in the DSC community we write functions. As an example, we always want to have this at the next layer. So I'm saving it, and then again, I wait for VS Code. There we go. So that's a little bit better. You see, PS Script Analyzer is already enforcing me to have the right thing. And then that's something we define in the DSC community. We have a certain standard that you can change if you want, but we say we want to have it written like this. And actually, it's going to tell me that true should not be a capital letter here. So let me, okay, I've saved it. It's going to take some time. Correct format. And okay, it says this should be like this. It's going to kick off. So like my computer is a bit slow, so PS Script Analyzer is a bit slow, but you see, no, it's written in the right way, and this is not the right way. So that's what PS Script Analyzer is doing. On everything, I just, I've already resolved all the dependencies, and I just say, hey, make sure it's compliant to the standards that we have, and that's defined in the VS Code Analyzer settings there. And by doing this, we can ensure that everyone knows what's going on. So we also have we also have tests, so pester tests to validate this, which I'm not going to show you today. So that's something we called HQRM tests. So we can run those high quality resource module tests to make sure that to enforce it's not going to go. And that's part of the Azure pipeline. When I run the build earlier, I don't run these, I only run unit tests because we have lots of tests to validate the quality, and that's specific to the DSC community, so I haven't run them here. But I could just do the same way, build, and then task, and then I think it's HQRM test, something like this. I need to look in it's probably this one actually, but it should be in there, HQRM test, there we go. So that's the name of my task. Actually, it's an alias for this task, but that's what it is. So yes, I could just run this, and that would validate Script Analyzer. Some of the things that we have, okay, is it documented? Does it have, a translate file? Like a lot of things like this, we automate. Even if you don't use that, it's a good project to look at because there's a lot of the tests, and they're coming from a different different module. If I go in the output, the required modules. We have DSC resource test, so that's very specific pester tests that runs against the modules we create, and we have the analyzer rules here. And this is another module which has a specific PowerShell PS Script Analyzer rules that we use. And we don't want to force everyone to use that what we have, but at least we have a fair bit in there which is useful, and I'd say we have a decent quality in the DSC community, which is good for people to. If you don't know where to start, maybe start there. Some of it will be annoying.
Yeah.
Some of it will be annoying, but at least it will be something to start with. And then if you want to write your own rules, then you can.
Yeah, that's the thing where people struggle, I think, to know where to start, and if they will start with the DSC module, I think that's the best solution for getting it into the DSC community to because this is the standard what the DSC community is using. So that's it's a good thing to start, and it's also a good tool for writing anything else like a DSC resource. So.
And that's part of what Raymond was saying earlier is people in some companies go with the traditional way, but then when you reach a point where you need to write a lot of modules because you're automating a lot of your environment, you need to be fast at creating new modules and publishing it, and you don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time. So you need to have a pipeline which is ready for you, and then you just consume that pipelines and you create new modules. And the more and more things you manage, the more and more modules you create. As an example, Azure now has Azure policy guest configuration that allows you to directly define what is managed within your Azure VMs, within the VMs, whether it's a Linux or a Windows VM, and you can manage that configuration settings. And that is just a PowerShell module that you write with a DSC resource, which is just an interface to some of the PowerShell code. So you just write a class, and I can show examples at some point, which is writing a class to say, hey, I want to make sure this is configured that way. And then this is done, used by Azure, and directly you spin up the VM, Azure policy, which is going to go into that VM and make sure this is configured. I'm going to stop there because really, that's a lot of information to digest in 2 hours. Sorry.
And no problem. I know that already. Okay, so you have any other questions? If not, I think we can.
You know where to reach me. So I'm at Gael Colas on Twitter.
Yes.
I'm on I'm on Twitter. I'm on Slack, especially the DSC channel on Slack. The best way to reach me is actually first ask the question to Raymond, and then if he really can't answer, he's lazy. But if he really can't answer, no, just kidding. You should get me on PS Slack. He's never on Slack as well, Raymond.
Yeah, if you look up at our appointment on Meetup, I have the Twitter listed in the Meetup of Gael, so you can reach him.
Yeah, and don't forget this.
Yes.
I'll be there.
Very, very important.
Yeah, I'll be there. And if you have any questions for PSConfU as well, feel free to reach out to me. But to get the news, the best way is to go to PSConfU and then click on register, or to follow PSConfU on Twitter.
So we get some feedback from Wolfgang Wagner. Thank you very much for this presentation. Sample looks very interesting. Definitely much, much richer than my handcrafted build scripts. It's sure I will take a deeper look. And for me, PSConfU will be a home game. I think it's
perfect.
In Vienna, I think.
That's
it's
good.
a very, very cool tool, and I think I definitely will take a look at that.
Sure. And Joy, and thank you for inviting me. That was cool.
Yeah.
And made me work back on my presentation skills as well.
Good presentations.
Thanks.
All right. I think we can call it a day.